Welcome back, Warriors, to another episode of the Warrior Way podcast. I am your host, Coach Cowan, and today I am joined in the studio with Quinn Wilson, who is an anti-influencer weight loss expert. And I know you're going to want to know what that means, so we're going to dive right into it and start having this conversation. How you doing today, Quinn?
Oh, it's a beautiful day. I've got coffee. The sun is shining. No complaints from me. Life is good. And yourself?
I'm doing great. I also have my coffee here in the studio.
Classic.
And the sun is shining. It's coming in through the windows at the side. That's what all that light there is from the window.
Yeah.
And yeah, life is good. Life is good. So, as I just mentioned, I referred to you as an anti-influencer weight loss because as we were chatting, you told me how you have, and I've been watching your content. You have lost a significant amount of weight, but you have kind of avoided all of the fad diets and what I would call guru advice.
Right.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about that? Tell me a little bit about your journey.
So this is actually the second time I've had a weight loss journey. When I was 25, I lost 100 pounds. I did that in about 8 months, and I did that exclusively with a low carb diet. But I found myself close to the end of that. My energy wasn't very good. I wasn't feeling, when I was in the gym, my lifts weren't kind of where I wanted them to be. So I definitely started adding carbs in. And then over the years, I was not very good with my eating habits. I didn't gain weight very quickly after that, but slowly and progressively put that weight back on. And at the beginning of this year, I was about 282 pounds. Entirely my fault. I don't blame anyone. I was eating far too much. I wasn't moving my body. All of my habits in terms of health habits were pretty bad, actually. So I decided this year was the year that I really needed to do something about it. I was feeling, just general things. Tying my shoes was difficult. Walking up the stairs was difficult. All these sort of things you kind of take for granted with a healthy body. It was difficult to do with the body that I had. So I also became a father last year. I realized I want to be able to play with my daughter. Thank you very much. I want to play with my daughter. I want to be there for her. I don't want to be the fat dad. So I decided I needed to do something about it. And on the first of the year, I started recording videos. I started sort of changing my habits slowly. I wasn't, jumping in day one, going to change my diet, change my exercise, change my consumption of anything. But over maybe 30 days, I was adding more water to my day. I was sleeping better. I started doing daily workouts, whether that was walking, whether that was, riding my spin bike, whether that was lifting weights, whatever it was, but doing things that I hadn't properly done for quite some time. And I was documenting the whole process. And over the course of the year, I'm down close to 70 pounds. I've actually been around now, I'm sort of getting back into it. I took about a week off. And that's another thing that I really wasn't doing properly throughout the year was I just wasn't getting enough rest. I think that losing weight or health or fitness or all these things, it really is just one big experiment. I think for a lot of people, they're told to do one thing and it's not effective for them, or they're told to do something that's very difficult for them. And I think small habits, can compound. I think that if you have enough of those small habits, it can make a very big change in your life. So that's kind of been my philosophy is, you don't need to deprive yourself of certain things. You don't need to be in the gym 2 hours a day. You can really just do what works for you. And it has had, very good results so far. I'm very satisfied and I'm still continuing. I still have some more fat to lose, but I'm not in a rush. I think a lot of people too, when it comes to weight loss, they sort of put a time on it. And I think that that's good if you want to have a general idea of how much you want to lose. But a lot of people, their expectations just don't match reality in terms of how much they think they can lose and how quickly they can lose that fat. And there's the ups and downs. There's, you step on the scale, you think you did everything right the day before and you're up 3 pounds. Yeah. And then there's the day you step on the scale when you did everything wrong and you're down 3 pounds. So it's not a very linear process. I know that some people think that you can be very precise and absolutely, lose weight, but for me, I think it's the law of averages. What you do over a week or over a month or over multiple months that is going to have a bigger impact than.
Yeah, it's more about the macro changes rather than the micro changes. Like if you slip up and choose to, and I shouldn't say slip up, if you choose to have a treat one day and you eat a donut, That's not going to throw your entire journey off, right? It's one day, because it's not the one day that's going to make the difference. If you've been eating clean and healthy and moving for 3 months, that one slice of birthday cake because Jenny in the office had a birthday is not going to, it's not going to destroy your whole thing. Now, if you have a birthday every day,
I had a year of birthdays every day. I think it was.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
When the cake becomes the macro.
Yeah. It's true though, because you have, it's these small things that add up, and people think, I slipped up or I ate that piece of cake. Everything's, out the window. Everything's terrible. Why not just eat the entire piece of cake? But then the inverse as well is, you wouldn't go to the gym one time and say, well, that's it. I guess I'm done. I'm fit now. We need to have like a very realistic attitude.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that, and that's kind of where some of the problem with weight loss comes in. So I have never experienced as significant of a weight loss as you. I did in my early 20s. I was working at business school. I go into business school, so I was working night shift in like a pizza place, and which meant I was also being paid the wages of this pizza place. So I ate as many of my meals as possible. So it was between them. Actually, I guess you're Canadian, so Little Caesars.
Yes.
Right. And then I was also working night shifts, like overnight shifts at Tim Hortons.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So those were the 2 jobs I had while I was going through business school. And so I ate as many meals as possible at those locations because I was making the kind of money that they pay, which is not much, especially, you're talking 15 years ago more, right? Like,
yeah.
I actually have to do the math. I always forget how old I am. I like to forget. But I put on a lot of weight. So I was always a very active guy all throughout high school. I played soccer. I cycled. I was a very, very healthy, active guy. I've been a vegetarian my entire life, so I've been very conscious about the food I eat. And all of a sudden, I gained so much weight so quick that it was New Year's Eve, and I was at a friend's house, and I got up from his couch to go grab another drink from the fridge, and I was out of breath by the time I got there. And the fridge was not far. It's a little 2-bedroom apartment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I decided right then and there I was going to make a change. And so my birthday is 3 weeks later. And I said, by my birthday, this problem has to be over. So I spent 3 weeks of doing nothing but eating potatoes, nothing else. Now, this is full disclosure. I do not recommend this to anybody because it was absolutely awful. I ate nothing but potatoes, no oils, no butters, sometimes a little salt. That was it. Drank a stupid amount of water. And every single day I would leave home, and I would run in a straight line as fast as I could, as far as I could, until I threw up. And then I'd run home. And I did it every single day for 3 weeks. And in the most unhealthy way, I dropped about 30 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Totally don't recommend to do it. I needed to take some kind of massive action.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started taking it easier on myself, started incorporating food back in, and corn never tasted as good. I got to tell you that much. And it was interesting because I flash forward a few years, and the famous magician, Penn Jillette, apparently that's exactly what he did just a few years back to lose all his weight. He went on a potato diet where he ate nothing but potatoes for like 3 months.
Jeez.
And it was really funny because he was talking about how the first food he added in was corn, which was the same as me. And he was like, oh, it just was so good.
Yeah.
So obviously that's a very dramatic kind of regimen I put myself on to lose some weight really quick. So you don't do that though. You've mentioned that you kind of stay away from like the fads and the extreme things. And you made a comment just a second ago about making slow adaptations and slow changes rather than big changes. Because I'm a little bit nuts when it comes to stuff. I like to put myself on 30-day challenges and 60-day challenges, and I'm just really mean to myself for 60 days to hit some goal. And that's just me. That's my personality. That's just how I am. But for a lot of people, it doesn't work. Right. And definitely a lot of people end up trying to start their weight loss journey, and they go on some extremely limiting diet that's so far out of what they normally consume. Mm-hmm. Like they go from, eating what they thought was clean and healthy to like an extreme keto diet where now all of a sudden they're eating tons of meat. Or they go from a diet where they eat lots of meat to all of a sudden they try to be vegan. Mm-hmm. And it's just those extreme diets. They go from not working out to, I got to hit the gym 5 times a week, and they burn their body out.
For sure.
So what was kind of like your approach? Like what does what does like month one look like for you when you are starting this? Like pretend I'm someone who came to you and I'm like, Quinn, I need to lose 40 pounds.
Yeah.
How would you start that process?
I feel like the process is more about, especially at the beginning, it's more about eliminating things than adding things in. And I think that for me, I have a sweet tooth. I love like candy more than I should. I enjoy cookies. I enjoy cake, all that sort of stuff. So I was eating obviously more than I should. I think almost any candy is probably more than you should, but I was eating far more than I should. And I just cut that stuff out. I really increased the amount of water I was drinking. I drink about 4
Not to
liters.
cut you off, but just to stay on the candy for a second, because I know one thing that's really hard for people when there's something that they're eating that they're not supposed to be eating. Like for me, it was potato chips.
Mm-hmm.
That was like my big crux. Did you replace it with something, or did you just decide, or would you recommend just stop eating candy altogether, or how do you handle the cravings? Like because if you're eating candy all the time and you're eating candy every single day, your mind's gonna want that candy. Your brain's
Right.
gonna be like, where's my treat? So what's some things that you would do or recommend for that kind of situation?
Well, the irony is my girlfriend's a nutritionist, and
Okay.
she's always, she's been nothing but lovely and sweet the entire time. She's never been on my case. She's never been, demanding that I do things. She's been there to support me 100% through everything. So one thing that she would say to me all the time is, if you didn't eat candy for however many days, and then you had some grapes, or you had an apple, or you had some pineapple, that sort of the sugar that you're getting from the fruit would suddenly taste like candy because you haven't been having that sugar. I think just the table sugar or whatever they put, the high fructose corn syrup that's in these candies, it sort of hijacks your brain into wanting that. You'd rather a piece of strawberry candy than an actual strawberry. So when you have a little sort of break, whether it's 2 or 3 days, it sort of, I think, assists your brain to crave natural sugars, things that when you haven't had candy or processed sugar for so long, or even just a couple days, when you eat that fruit, it does taste better. So I think with someone who's quitting smoking, they would say maybe chew gum or whatever it is. You want something to sort of replace that habit. And for me, I started eating more fruit. I was also eating a lot more protein. So just in general, I think sometimes when you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, your appetite goes up. So if you're eating processed carbs, your appetite probably goes up even more. So for me, by adding more protein, by adding more fat, I was more satiated. So I wasn't really craving these things. And then just avoiding them for a small amount of time and replacing them with something more natural, more healthy, it sort of replaces it in terms of cravings. So even now, I'm not going to say I've never eaten candy this year. I mean, that'd be lying. I've had ice cream, I've had cookies, I've had a number of things, but it's just not a daily thing. It's not something I do continuously. It's not something that I even have in the house. Like the irony would, be, I think, in like December, you'd open the kitchen cupboards and you would see chocolate bars. You would see literal like Sour Patch Kids, gummy candies. You would see things that just shouldn't be in your cupboards. And now you'll open those same cupboards and you just don't find any of that. I just don't bring it into the house as well. I remember way back in the day with Dr. Phil, when he had his weight loss book, one of the things that he said was creating a no-fail environment. If you don't have candy in the house, you can't eat candy. And you have to replace it with something, to satisfy that craving. So we always have fruit in the house, and that just became the new thing. So just not even having it in the house is quite significant. And then just finding something that is a much healthier alternative is, I think, sort of a great way to achieve that.
So that's some great advice, because you can do anything for 3-4 days.
Yeah.
Anybody can do anything. Even people who are quitting smoking, which I was an avid smoker myself for quite a long time. And I went from 2 packs a day to quitting, right? And so I understand how hard it is. You can do the first couple of days isn't what's hard. It's later on. So I really liked your advice about just hold off on those couple of days. Give yourself the couple of days without the sugar. If that, when we're talking on that sugar specifically, give your couple days stuff, a couple days without the sugar, and then go buy some really nice grapes.
Yeah.
And they actually even make grapes that taste almost like cotton candy now. Like there's some delicious fruit out there. Yeah, or try a new fruit you haven't tried. Go get some dragon fruit or something interesting that, experience it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's some great advice. And I also like how you pointed out how it's not just one thing. It's not just about eliminating sugar, because you mentioned how you also made some adjustments to your diet to make it so you weren't hungry. So you weren't fighting hunger and a sugar craving at the same time. It was just the sugar craving, which you were able to eat a couple strawberries. And I mean, a couple strawberries a day is good for you. So that's a benefit.
Wonderful.
They do. So that is awesome. Now, I kind of cut you off there because I felt like that was a really important subject to go on, because I know a lot of people get stuck on that. So you were continuing to talk about changes that you would suggest someone makes in the beginning, and you started mentioning water intake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm a huge proponent of increasing water. Some days I drink 3-4 liters a day just out of from regular bottles, right?
Yeah.
I actually make sure I pack myself before going to the office 4 every single day, so that between that and my coffees and everything, I get enough water. Now, did you find that you weren't drinking much water during the times where you were gaining weight and you were, before you started this journey? Like, what was that like? Was that one of the things that you kind of fell off the wagon with?
I've always, to be honest, I've always been a big water drinker, but I just wasn't cognizant of how much I was drinking. And one thing that I did that was super helpful is on Amazon, I grabbed a gallon jug, and it has sort of these timelines as you drink down through the jug. By this time you should have drank this much or whatever it is. But that, I think, was very helpful because it's very visual. Some people, they may be drinking from multiple water bottles, but they might lose track of how much they've drank. But by having this one giant jug, you can see how much you've had. And for me, I do love water, but I just find it can be very boring, very plain. So I would just put some lemon in there, or I have some vitamin C powder. I'd throw that in. It sort of gives it almost like a lemon flavor. But by doing that, you almost crave the water because there's a flavor there. It's very refreshing. And I think, avoiding sugary drinks, I say that as someone who has sugar in their coffee right now, so I'm a bit of a hypocrite, but you don't want to be drinking, a gallon of Coca-Cola every day, or you don't.
There's a difference between the 1 or 2 sugars in your couple cups of coffee a day versus a can of Coca-Cola with 34 grams in the one can.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a big difference. And I'm a Dr. Pepper guy, so I think it's more like 42 grams. So yeah, it's leave that as a treat.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing is, even if you have something like that, if you feel like I can't give this up, can you give it up, every 3 days and have it on the 4th day? Give it up every weekday and only have it on the weekends. Like, I was raised in a house where we were only allowed to have sugared cereal on the weekend. So during the week, we were eating, whatever we would eat. And then on Saturday and Sunday, my parents would allow us to have this. So I think even something like that is, if you sort of number it out, it's like 70 to 80% of your week is not spent consuming the bad thing. And then if you're only doing it 1 or 2 days a week, or you're only doing it for 1 or 2 meals a day, whatever it is on, the day you designate to do it, I think it just, it makes such a big difference to have these small little things. And I really do think that it's these small things that add up, and then you sort of build momentum. There's things, for example, exercise. Most of the time when I'm exercising, I'm not necessarily thrilled to do it, but I know that once I'm done that exercise, I will feel exponentially better. And I always just sort of remember that. Like, it's the same thing even with consuming things that don't taste, that taste good rather. If you're having a can of Coke, you probably don't feel better after a can of Coke. And if you remember that in the moment or before you're going to do it, you might actually just avoid it and say, you know what, I will save this for just one day of the week, or, Saturday night, I'm allowed to have pizza and Coca-Cola, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think so much of it is people feel like they need to do everything or they do nothing. And, if you have one piece of cake, you go, well, there goes the diet. I'm just going to have whatever I want today. And then one day turns into a week, and then it turns into a month. And before you know it, you sort of undone all the gains that you've made. So I think just having like a realistic, attitude towards everything can make a huge difference. Doing small things can make a huge difference. And like you said earlier, if you can pretty much do anything for a couple days. It's just, is it incentivized? Is there, enough of a reason for you to want to do that? And again, for me, I think that it was a lot easier by having my daughter. She turned 1 in January, and I just thought, I don't want to die, bluntly. I don't want to die. So I'd like to do something that would extend my life. I would like to do something that will allow me to live longer, but also live healthier and have more energy and feel better. So these were things that were sort of foundational or kind of underlying a lot of the reason I was doing it. And I think, as cliche and kind of cheesy as it is, if you have a purpose, if you have like that why you're doing something, things do become a lot easier. If I told you, can you get to, Paris, France within 12 hours, you might say, I don't know. But if I told you there was $1 million waiting for you there, it would be very easy for you to get there. You'd find a way to get there. So
I'd be there in 10.
Exactly. You'd swim. The thing is, like, if you have, a good enough reason why you're doing something. And I think people, they often think, I need to figure this out, or, I need to know what that is. I think sometimes you kind of uncover it. It might not be that obvious. It might not be what you think it is. You might have this idea of why you're doing something, and it really isn't the reason why you're doing it. So I think that even takes time. Don't expect to know immediately or have that sort of knowledge right away. Sometimes it takes a month or two before you start to realize, this is actually why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think that whether it's a good behavior or a bad behavior, we have our reasons why we do it. And, with exercise, I wasn't doing it because it's work. It's not easy. It takes time. You have to schedule it. You have to do things that maybe aren't very comfortable. I think every single time I'm about to do shoulder presses, I regret my decision to be working out. And then when those shoulder presses are done, I feel very good. But I know that that's going to be difficult. I know that it's not going to feel wonderful while I'm doing it, but I'll be satisfied when it's done. And I know that, when everything is said and done physically, I will be very happy with the results by actually doing that thing.
No, I definitely agree. And I like that you touched on the concept of why, and also your personal story on what your why was this round, and it was your child and wanting to be around. Because that's exactly actually same way how I quit smoking 18 years ago. It was when I found out I was going to be a dad, and I was like, the last thing in the world I wanted to be was a dad who smoked, because before that point, my smoking affected me in my mind. I mean, now I realize it affected everybody, right? If my health deteriorated, that would affect my parents, that would affect my friends, my siblings. So it was quite selfish behavior, really. But I all of a sudden realized that I'm now going to be responsible for somebody else. And what kind of man, what kind of father did I want to be for her? So that's what helped me quit. That was my why. And there's like there's an expression that's if your why doesn't make you cry, then it's not big enough.
Yeah.
And that one was huge. Like I quit very shortly after finding out that I was going to be a dad. But I do also like your point on how not for everybody, your why is not necessarily going to be so clear cut, so obvious, so easy to pinpoint right away. And it might take some time. That's actually a huge part of what I do in my programs is we actually do a lot of shadow work, and we dig in and kind of figure out what those motivators are and what is it. Because on the surface, you might be like, okay, well, why do you want to, like, why are you, look, if this is someone's trying to start a new business or make more money. It's like, well, why do you want to make more money? So, well, I want, a better lifestyle, I want this. But then when you drill down, it's like, no, you want to make, the actual reason is you felt that your childhood was really rough and you didn't have certain things. And, you felt like you were made fun of on the playground, and you don't want your kids to experience that. You want your children to have an easier life. You don't want your kids to have to work so hard. And you realize that your why actually has nothing to do with you. It was all about someone else. And then a lot of times when I work now exclusively with men, so I'll say a lot of times now when men figure that out, that's actually their motivator, that's really powerful. Yeah. And then it makes things like, for example, with you're talking about weight loss and exercise. makes things like going to the gym and doing the shoulder presses a lot easier, because in your mind, you're not doing this for you, you're doing this for your kid.
Right.
Right. You're doing this so that you can lift her up. You said you had a daughter, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I got 4 myself. So, but yeah, you're doing this so that you can lift her up all the way through the different years of her life, right? Like it's easy to lift them when they're 1, but like, if I try to lift my 18-year-old, it might not be as easy, right?
Yeah.
But so it's definitely something that everyone needs to kind of explore before you. And I wouldn't say before you go into anything, because there's a lot of reasons. Like we're talking weight loss here. There's a lot of reasons to lose weight. I know, like even just for improved mobility and joint pain, like they say every pound that you lose is 3 pounds of pressure off your kneecaps.
Yeah.
Right. So even that alone, like I have knee problems from, I'm an ex carpenter.
Okay.
So from all of that kind of work and playing soccer and cycling, I've destroyed my knees. Absolutely destroyed them. Right. So like this summer, for example, we had a bunch of family come in from Florida. We had family from out west in Alberta come and stay with us for a while. And we were enjoying our summer with them. So we did a lot of barbecues. We did a lot of sweet desserts. Probably drank a little too much beer and wine on the weekends. And I put some weight on.
Mm-hmm.
And before I noticed it with tightness of my shirts or my belt or anything, the first place I noticed it was my knees. Like I knew, I just got up one day and started walking. I was like, oh, and just in my head, I'm like, that feels about 10 pounds. And when I checked the scale, I had actually gained 12 pounds over like that month. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like it was just the worst kind of weight. It was pizza and beer weight. Like just like some of the most stubborn weight,
Yeah.
And I've started dropping back down, but my method has kind of been similar to yours. I've really reduced, how much sugar and extra things like that I'm eating. I've gone back to really making sure I'm hitting my water targets. I'm trying to get enough sleep, although I'm really bad for that. And it's coming off a little bit. I'm not being as active as maybe I should. That might help out a little bit, but yeah. So we've covered, reducing sugar and kind of removing some things. We've covered the importance of water. We've talked about, your motivators, everything like that. So let's talk a little bit about how you would recommend some maybe adjust their diet a little bit. You touched in on kind of reducing your like a high carb load and instead focusing more on like proteins and fats. And why don't you just give me, for like an average person, average North American diet, what would that kind of look like?
I feel like for the average person, you can't go wrong. I'm going to make recommendations of someone who's consuming meat, but obviously there's,
of course,
protein sources for vegetarians, there's protein sources for vegans. But I think that just by increasing the protein that you're eating, reducing the carbs you're eating, you don't have to eliminate them. I've done that before, and I will say that the results were much better. They were much faster, but it's not necessarily as enjoyable. It's not as sustainable. There's a lot of, there's the pros and the cons to anything. But I think for the average person, if they just focused on drinking more water, getting more protein, eating, more fiber, whether that's through fruits, whether that's through vegetables, just eating a more natural diet, I think is very helpful. There's things that you can eat that aren't necessarily natural. There's things you could have like protein shakes. You can have all these things that are man-made, but I think it would be best if you just tried to stick to animals, plants, and reducing the amount of carbs that you're eating. Again, if people that doesn't work for them, that's totally fine. And I think that's one thing that people don't really think about is there's no one size fits all for weight loss. There's nothing that's going to work for everybody. There's things that, for example, I don't eat fish. I just don't enjoy the taste of fish. So if I was eating a diet that was very heavy in fish, it would not be pleasant for me. I would not enjoy it. I would, avoid eating probably all the time. But I think people just need to find what works for them. What is realistic for them? You don't need to do something extreme. You don't need to do something crazy. Do what works for you. Focus on the things that are helping you, that are moving you forward, but also focus on having a day off, having, maybe not at the beginning. I think a lot of people sort of at the beginning, they give them, selves 5 or 6 days and they go, I've earned it, I'm going to take that day off. You can do that. If that does work for you, go right ahead. But I think most people, once you sort of get into the routine, because I think that is a big thing, is it becomes kind of a routine. It becomes kind of a ritual to your daily life. What am I having for breakfast? Am I eating breakfast? How much water am I drinking? How much sleep am I getting? How's my stress? I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't consider is how stressed out you are. If you're stressed all the time, it can be more difficult to lose weight. Your hormones are changing. There's things that can affect the metabolism of fat. There's things that can affect how much fat you're storing or burning. These are all things that are not even related to food. Some people don't think about that. Some people deny it, but I think there's pretty clear evidence that hormones
there's definitely
play a big role in losing weight or gaining weight. So,
and I'd like to add to that. It's not just about when you're stressed. It's not just about how your body is going to absorb food. Now they have done studies, simple ones, as far as the way you think about your food as you're eating it actually can change your response to the food.
Yeah.
Where like you're more likely, if you're thinking your food's garbage, you're more likely to not absorb all of the nutrients in it, because your body, because you release all these different endorphins and stuff. People don't realize how powerful their mind is, and it actually can change how your body will uptake these nutrients.
Yeah.
Where if you enjoy your food, even if it's McDonald's, and you're like, this is delicious, you're more likely to pick up some of the nutrients that actually are McDonald's. Because despite what everyone wants to believe, there are some nutrients in McDonald's.
Yeah.
Not many, but there are some. I mean, it's still food. Yeah. It's still food. It's still food, right? The fries saw a potato at some point, right? So
yeah.
But yeah, so like definitely the way you're thinking about it and your mood to it. But the flip side of that too is when you're under a lot of stress and you're really stressed out, especially if you're allowing yourself to get stressed out over your diet, because that's just you're setting yourself up to failure for that. When you're under a lot of stress, not only is your body less likely to respond properly to food, you're also going to end up having an increase of cravings for the things you're not supposed to eat, because your body knows, oh, you know what? When you eat that ice cream, it makes you feel good. It makes it's a treat. It's going to hit the dopamine. It's going to release, all the tasty pleasure brain chemicals, right? So your body's gonna be like, oh, you know what? You're not feeling good. Just why don't you treat yourself? Why don't you treat yourself to a milkshake? Why don't you treat yourself to some French fries? Or why don't you or in my case, treat yourself to an entire bag of chips, right? So stress is definitely a huge factor. Like people tend to drink more when they're stressed, right? And when you're drinking more, now if you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to eat all kinds of junk, but I'll have a couple beers, or I'll have too much wine. I'll have a couple extra glasses. Well, what happens as soon as you start drinking is your ability to think goes down, and now the bag of chips seems like a much better idea.
Yeah.
Because your logical centers are down. So I'm really happy you brought up stress, because that is a huge part of one. Now, I don't know about you. Are you someone who does meditation and other stress relieving practices?
I'm a huge nature person. So I'm very blessed. Where I live right by a river, and there's a ton of greenery around me. So I think one of the things that helps me more than anything, and I've been like this my whole life, is walking. I just love walking. And now that podcasts are a thing, I probably am consuming in excess of 10 hours every single week of podcasts. I just can't get enough of them. But for me, just throwing on a podcast, going for a walk in nature, it just seems to alleviate most of that stress. Whether it's the blood flowing, whether it's the exercise, whether it's the endorphins, it can also just be a distraction. I think just being somewhere else where you're not sort of ruminating on these stressful thoughts has been just super helpful for me. I've tried meditation. I'm terrible at it. I feel like I know that everyone is often pretty garbage when they start, but I would do a 5-minute meditation and I'd have to bring myself back to the breath 20 times. I would just, my mind just wanders very easily. I should probably do it more because I know that it's very good. And
we can definitely have a chat about that later, because I'm a big meditator, so I can definitely help you out with that on a separate conversation.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think that, just finding something that allows you to not, and again, you're never going to live stress free. You're never going to be someone who has zero stress. It just doesn't happen. So I think just getting that idea out of your head that you'll somehow find this heaven place where you don't ever feel stress is silly. But if you can reduce the stress, I mean, I like to think in numbers. If you knew that you could reduce your stress by 20%, 30% a week, that's a big improvement. And if you can continually do that and know that your stress levels will be reduced, it just leads to a better life. I think, so many people, whether it's, again, they want to lose 100 pounds in 12 weeks, or they want to make $1 million in 12 months, or anything that they want to do, if you kind of give yourself adequate time and also just make small incremental gains, that can be huge. And I think that just sort of that compounding effect is enormous in so many ways, but also just thinking that you have to use realistic thoughts. You have to think to yourself, is this something that is possible? Is this realistic? Is this something that I can do? And if the answer is yes, by all means, go for it. But too many people, I think, they assume I'm just going to do this and I will never have stress. I will never feel anxious. I will never feel depressed, or, these negative emotions will never show up in my life again. It's just never going to happen. So just sort of accepting that those are part of life helps a lot. But then also knowing that you can deal with it helps a lot. And knowing if you can reduce it, just whatever number you reduce it by, it's an improvement. So just finding a way to get any reduction can lead to an improvement.
So 100% fully agree. Like reduce the stress that you can reduce, and learn some tools to kind of mitigate the effects of the stress you can't get rid of, right? It's like, the power to change the things you can and handle the things you can't. Because like, you're right, life is always going to throw stuff at you. You're never going to live in a perfect world where there's nothing bad that happens. And honestly, I don't know if I would want to, because all the negative stuff in your life, as much as you don't like it, and as much as it sucks when you go through it, it's what makes the good times so good. It's what makes those good moments so good. If everything always felt like that, I feel like we might get kind of dull and numb to it. It would be like everyone wants to get a house on the beach. I know people who had a house on the beach, and sure, it was always great, but I'm sure there was many times where they didn't look out at the water. There was probably many nights where they forgot the water was there because it just kind of became.
It's like habituated. You just become it's just normal, and then you just forget about it.
Yeah, right. It's always, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? You're living by the beach, now you're missing living. You're like, oh, I want to farm. I want to live in the prairies. Hey, that just looks so peaceful. I want to be in the mountains.
Yeah.
You're in the mountains. You're like, oh man, I want to live on the beach. And it's the same thing with everything. So you're never going to be able to completely remove stress. The other thing I really like that you mentioned was talking about how if you look at something like this big picture, like you want to lose a ton of weight in a short period of time, that's a huge, insane undertaking. I'm a big fan of goal setting, and I have rules that I set with my clients and with myself and with my kids when it comes to setting goals. And that's that the goal needs to be meaningful, which obviously losing a lot of weight is. It needs to be measurable, which again, you mentioned, X amount of pounds, X amount of days, that is measurable, but it also needs to be obtainable, right? So one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard about someone talking about weight loss, forgetting his name. It was actually another TikToker.
Okay.
And he talks about, it's not about, I don't know if you've seen him. He looks a little bit like Robert Downey Jr. I don't know if you've seen his stuff pop on. He sounds kind of like him too. It's like, at first I thought he was a impersonation account, but he's a weight loss account.
Okay.
But he says, he's like, if you need to lose 50 pounds, losing 50 pounds isn't the goal. It's like the goal is to lose 1 pound 50 times.
Yeah.
It's like, you're just losing 1 pound. That's your goal. It's just the next pound, right? Stop worrying about the scale. If you want to be 200 and you're 250, 200 is not your goal. 249 is. And he's like, if you do that, and then as soon as you hit that goal, 249, you're like, all right, 248, let's go. And it's just 1 pound.
Yeah.
And so it's just small increments, small steps.
And you're stacking wins at that point, because if your goal is to lose 1 pound, that's a victory. And if you do that 50 times, that's 50 victories, versus if you say you lose 50 pounds, that's 1 victory. So it's sort of, it makes you want to do it again because you saw how, in a sense, simple it was, but it also keeps you on that path because it's not this lofty, I need to do 50 pounds in 2 months. It's, I just need to do a pound at a time. And then once I reach that goal, I've reached that goal.
Yeah. And And you know, and every time you hit that 1 pound goal, every time you hit that small goal, and now everyone, this transfers over to anything outside of weight loss. Like this isn't just weight loss. This is with anything. You break it down into small chunks, and then every time you complete a chunk. So we'll stick with weight loss because it's a numbers game that's easy to discuss. Every pound, you go and do a stupid dance. You figure out some kind of like, end zone party. Obviously don't go and treat yourself to a slice of cake because that would defeat your purpose, but do some kind of physical thing, whether it's you crank a specific tune and do some kind of stupid dance to it. Celebrate your wins. And if your goals, like you said perfectly, Quinn, if your goal is 50 pounds, so you choose to make it your goal is 1 pound 50 times, that is 50 celebrations. Now, if you've celebrated 12 times, that means you've dropped 12 pounds and all of a sudden you gain 2 pounds. It's not going to feel so dramatic. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like, okay, we got this. It's going to be kind of like, to use a sports analogy. I'm not a huge sports guy, but kind of like if you're doing really good and you're winning a game. If you were 12, I was a soccer guy. If I was in a game of soccer and my team had 12 points over the other team, and then they score 3 goals on me, I'm not going to throw in the towel and go, oh, well, I guess it's all done now. I'm like, no, I'm still up. I'm still winning.
Yeah.
Right. I'm still 9 points on these guys. And now you just make more determined that now you need to increase that spread even more. Be like, you know what? They just scored 3 on me. I'm going to do 6 on them.
Yeah.
And it changes the way you look at it because you're looking at one little thing at a time instead of this massive accomplishment.
I think too, if you sort of, again, if you have that big picture thinking where you're looking, over the course of, a month, 2 months, 3 months, it seems insignificant if you do gain a pound. And I think, full transparency at the beginning, if I did gain weight, what's going on? How's this happening? I'm doing all the right things. But now if I gain a couple pounds, like I took my girlfriend and my daughter, they went to the Cayman Islands. They had a week down there. It was wonderful. I stayed here, but the only workouts I did, I walked. I didn't watch my diet. I kind of ate whatever I wanted within reason. I wasn't totally crazy, but over the course of those 11 days or so that they were gone, I put on about, I think it was just under 10 pounds in that time. But then that's another thing. I have one of those digital scales where it gives you body composition. It gives you sort of things that aren't just how much you're weighing.
Okay.
And I put on 3.8 pounds of muscle in that time. And it was, I think, a lot to do with the fact that I have not properly rested like that in so long that my body just didn't have the resources to do what it needs to do. I was working out. I train jujitsu, so I do that twice a week. I was lifting weights 5 days a week. Sometimes I'm doing 2 workouts a day. This isn't necessarily recommended. This is just something that I do because I enjoy it. I really enjoy the workouts that I'm doing. So that's another thing is if you're enjoying it, you'll stick with it. So for me, it's been quite easy to kind of stick with it. But I just decided I need some time. I need some time to just chill out and do whatever I want and feel like a bum for a week. And in that time, when I put on that weight, my first thought wasn't like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? I'm ruined. I better just eat whatever I want for the rest of my life. I didn't care. I didn't care at all. And I was transparent about it. I didn't pretend online like, the weight's still coming off.
Yep.
I told the truth. I was like, I put on like 10 pounds and
that makes your content more valuable though, because that's what's going to happen in real life with actual people. And if people follow like all the gurus and all like the influencer, like a lot of times you have all these fitness people who they have natural genetically great metabolisms and they've always been in shape, and now they're trying to tell you how to lose weight, and it's going to make you feel like garbage all the time. Where when you follow someone like you who you put on the weight and you're losing it, and you stumble and gain weight again, but then you lose it, it's more encouraging because it's real.
Yeah, I mean, weight loss isn't linear. That's the thing. People think that it's either down or it's up, but it's not really any of those things. It's up and down. And there's going to be times where your body gains weight and you don't necessarily understand why. Or maybe you are doing stupid things. Maybe you do need to, tune your diet up or change the way you're approaching it. But I think that, I remember many, many years ago reading a book not related to weight loss, but it was by a psychologist, David Burns, and the book is called Feeling Good. And he talks about 10 cognitive distortions. And they really apply to everything in your life, whether it's weight loss, whether it's relationships, whether it's your career, whatever you're you want to apply these to, you can apply them to. And I think if you have realistic thinking, if you don't sort of distort your thinking, one of them he has is called all or nothing thinking. So I'm either perfect on my diet or I don't diet at all. I'm either perfect for my workouts or I just don't work out at all. Like, this is a terrible way of approaching things. Life happens, things come up, you might have a holiday, you might have, a family event, you might have something that in a sense derails you, but that's okay. I mean, that's to be expected. To live this life where you're constantly succeeding, it's just not realistic. So I think if you have sort of a realistic attitude that things will happen, things will come up, things won't always go my way, but I'm going to persevere. I'm going to continue doing what I need to do, or taking the proper steps, or, even small things. If you never work out and you started doing a 10-minute workout 3 times a week, at the end of the month, how much more time have you spent working out compared to 0? So it could be 5 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be whatever that, you're comfortable with. I mean, when I was 282 pounds, my goodness, doing anything was difficult. You think to yourself, like, a body weight squat was not an easy thing to do. And now I can do, 50 in a row or 100 in a row or what. I've never tested, but it's substantially easier. So I think you have to give yourself a bit of grace as well. I think when you start out, you're going to make mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. You won't fully understand what you're doing. But again, that's not just weight loss, that's life. I mean, if you're learning a new skill, if you're, in a relationship, a new relationship, if you're at your job, it could be anything. You're not going to be perfect. You never will be, but especially at the beginning, you're not going to be perfect. You got to find a way to just accept that and do what you can, take the steps you can, make the progress you can. And over time, it will get you the result you want. I think that no matter how slow you're moving, how little progress you're making, if you're still moving, if you're still making progress, it's better than if you did nothing at all, or if you were reverting and eating things that you shouldn't every day, or never working out, or doing, certain habits that just aren't good for you. It doesn't matter. It's all small. It all adds up, and it will make a huge difference if you give yourself enough time. I think that the time horizon just needs to be something people focus on, not the days, not the weeks, not the months, just here's where I am, here's where I want to be. And these are the things that will allow me to get to that goal. It could be anything, but specifically with weight loss, if you're eating the way you're supposed to be, if you're moving the way you're supposed to be, resting the way you're supposed to be, and again, what's right for your body, you can get those results. You can get exactly what you want, and just realize that it might take time. It might not be perfect, but just keep going and you'll get what you need.
That is awesome advice. Great advice. And I love that you, again, doubled down that this isn't just about weight loss, that this is about pretty much everything. And you just have to keep moving forward. And every step in the right direction is a step in the right direction, even if you're tiptoeing, even if it's a little step, right? And just to run back to your little analogy there of like 10-minute workout 3 times a week, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you do the quick math, that's over 2 hours of workout a month.
Yeah.
And if you're not working out at all, if you're not doing any movement, if you're have an office job, or you have some kind of physical condition that's not allowing you to be very active, if you could add in those 10 minutes once a week, that's 2 hours every single month. That's a lot over the course of a year. It's almost a whole day, right? Of actually working hard. And if you look at it in that kind of aspect, you realize that those little tiny efforts might not seem like a lot at once, but when you start stacking them on top of each other and you're being consistent, that's what makes all the difference in the world.
What's that saying about, if you want to see how something small can make a big difference, is sleep in a room with a mosquito? Like it's the truth. I mean, I've unfortunately slept in a room with a mosquito, and it has, disrupted my sleep. But you think just something that tiny wouldn't have an effect, but it definitely does.
Absolutely, it does. Well, I mean, this has been a very inspiring conversation. Um, the only thing I really have left on here that I want to kind of touch on, which really doesn't have anything to do with the weight loss, doesn't have anything to do with that. So if you have anything else you want to mention about weight loss, we should go about that first. But I got to ask you about your experience in living in South Korea. I know it's completely unrelated to this. It's just, that is a cool thing. Like, how long were you there?
So I was there just a little over 2 years. I was there from 2018 until 2020. I unfortunately chose to come back to Canada during the pandemic, where it was a lot of rules, and Korea, it was a little more reasonable with their rules. Canada was a little more difficult, but
yeah, we were pretty strict lockdown here.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there was just a whole bunch of things that thankfully are in the past, but it was amazing. I absolutely loved living there. I didn't know what to expect. I have one of my older brothers has lived there since 2011. So he was always trying to persuade me to come over. You'll love it. It's amazing. You can, travel to different countries. You can experience a new culture. You can try all this new food. You can do all these things. And my goodness, Korea was just the time of my life. I think honestly, not a day goes by where I don't kind of want to go back, even just to, as a tourist. But the Korean people were just amazing. It was such a safe country. It was such a, an accessible country. It felt like I was stepping into the future. A lot of the infrastructure there is just phenomenal. The medical system is just, you want to see a doctor, you can see one whenever you want. There's just so many good things in that regard. But Korean food, Korean art, I went to a number of different museums. I was able to see, actually, I went to see Team Canada play at the Olympics, which was the men's hockey. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, got to go to a couple different locations in the country. It's nice because, Canada's just enormous. I think the flight from Toronto to Seoul is about 15 and a half hours. And the first, I think, 7 hours of the flight, we were still over Canada. So it's just...
That's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's like 130 Koreas could fit inside Canada. Some just wild number, but it was amazing. I would recommend it to anyone. While I was there, I was able to go to Japan. I was able to go to Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand. And I think just Asia in general is so much fun, so beautiful, so much history. Canada's like a baby country. We have, very little, modern history, but you can see thousands and thousands, of years of history there. So I
experienced that when I went to Budapest. It was the same kind of, it was like my first time getting I had been to Mexico and seen some really old stuff, but Budapest really put in perspective, because you're walking on this very modern road beside these very modern buildings, and you look over the edge and there's walls and structures that are Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Like, it puts perspective just how like you said, how young Canada is, because we don't have that history here.
I know. You look at what's the oldest building in Toronto? It's probably like a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
And then you can go to Korea and see a building that's literally thousands of years old. So
you could argue we have history because we do have the Indigenous people, and today is
Reconciliation.
Truth and Reconciliation Day. I just happen to be wearing orange. It just kind of worked out. So we could argue we have that, but we don't have. It's not the same kind of thing where there's buildings and structures and physical things that we can go and see to kind of have a glimpse into the past. We can only do that through stories and retelling of traditions here. It's really interesting when you travel the world.
Yeah.
And as a Canadian, and you realize that, wow, we haven't been here very long as Canada, right? We're an infant.
I know. And it just sort of makes you really, when I left Canada, I felt almost tired of Canada, if you will. I was like, Canada's boring. Canada's this, Canada's that. And I was just really excited to go somewhere else. But then in the process of being there, I kind of realized, no, Canada's got some really nice things and just beautiful history and, beautiful nature and crazy animals and all these things that I was like, well, actually, Canada's not so bad. So I think sometimes it is nice to just get away from your environment or just switch up your environment. And it helps you to appreciate the new place, but it also allows you to appreciate the old place.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you just to kind of bring it back, not so much to weight loss, but a big part of weight loss and everything that we've been talking about today has been food. So let's just segue from Korea to food. What was for someone who's traveling to South Korea, example, let's say another Canadian is going there for the first time, and whether it's healthy or not, put that aside. Don't worry about that for this question. What's one thing that somebody has to try, has to eat when they get to South Korea? Like what's the street food or the meal that you miss the most?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's just so many. It really is like a food paradise there. I think that's another thing
Very
about
food
Canada.
kind of
We eat
country. That's why
everybody
I'm
else's
asking.
food. There's like no Canadian food. So in Korea, where it's all this like unique cuisine, I think, for the average person, Korea is very well known for fried chicken. They do it differently. It's like super crispy, super moist. It's very different than maybe, Southern fried chicken from the States. That's one thing. I think there's a couple dishes that just really stand out. One is bulgogi, which is like a beef dish with like it's marinated and there's some, flavors in there that just, it's like heaven on a plate. There's also something called dak galbi, which is like, I guess it's like chicken thighs or chicken ribs, or there's something, I don't know necessarily what it is, but the way that they marinate it, the way that they cook it, what it's served with, it's just, oh my gosh. Like part of why I got fat was because of my time in Korea. So I definitely gained weight. It was amazing because they're very blunt there. So you in Canada, if you see a fat person, you're not supposed to say anything, but I would have students at the school where I was working just constantly saying, "Teacher, you're fat. You're fat." And their definition of fat is very different than a Western definition. If you have like 15 pounds, you're obese.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just so amazing. I mean, there's things that I didn't necessarily eat very much of in Canada. And then when I was living there, I just fell in love with, and now I eat them all the time here. But and I mean, everything is so convenient. So everything's 24 hours, it seems. If you want to go get some beers, you can get them at 3 a.m. If you wanted to get some fried chicken, you can get it literally anytime you want. Like there's sort of no hindrance or no barriers to eating there. You can just get what you want. Like the convenience stores are just tremendous. So yeah, I if anyone ever goes there, no matter what you try, whether you're vegetarian, whether you're a meat eater, whether you're somewhere in between, you will find something, you will fall in love with it. It is just phenomenal.
That is awesome. Just see if I can get this episode sponsored by South Korea Tourism.
Yeah.
That felt like an amazing commercial for that.
For sure.
Well, this has been a awesome conversation. I think the takeaways, or at least for me, the main takeaways from this is that weight loss doesn't need to be this big, complicated, scary thing. That it is actually just a series of small changes, small actions, small efforts, kind of compounded over time.
Yeah. And
you just have to stick with it.
Yeah.
You just got to keep moving. Just like this is how you can tell I have little kids. My mind immediately went to just keep swimming, like Dory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's how you can tell I have a house full of children, right? And I feel like that's kind of like the main message. I feel like most people know what they're eating that they shouldn't be eating. Most people know what they're not eating that they should be eating, right? Like, sure. I think it's pretty universal knowledge right now that it's less French fries, more salad is kind of like, I feel like everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But it's not no French fries and only salad. It's less French fries and more salad, right? It's small changes and still enjoying the food you like, but make some conscious decisions to try to eat a little healthier and move more and drink more water. Reducing stress was a big one that we touched on today, which I think is probably one of the biggest things, because if you're stressed out, you're not going to do any of the other stuff. If working out for you is hard, if trying to eat healthy is hard, if you're stressed out as well, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that maybe might be kind of like the first step I would suggest from my perspective. Just figure out mitigating that first, because it'll make everything else easier.
100%.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm looking forward to continuing on following you on your journey on TikTok there. Everyone can find Quinn at the Fat Quinn Show.
Yep.
Right. It's pretty easy to remember and look up. What platforms are you on with this? Are you on just TikTok, or are you on other platforms as well?
I am on them all. I'm just actually closing in on 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. The rest of them is maybe not as successful, but yeah, it's on the major ones: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. All the content as it stands, it's exactly the same. It's just put into the different apps or websites. So, pick one, you're pretty much going to get the same video as the other three. So yeah, just
awesome.
The daily video.
So that's the Fat Quinn Show. I will, depending on what platform you're watching this on or listening to this on, there will be links in the show description or notes or somewhere below, depending on where you're watching this. But check out his stuff, give him a follow along his journey, and pull some advice from him. Hopefully it inspires you to begin your journey. I know if you're like myself, everyone has got a couple pounds to lose. I know I certainly do, especially after this summer. So yeah, follow along the Fat Quinn Show. Get some motivation, and just really get. I want everyone to really take from this episode is just that it doesn't need to be this big, crazy, scary thing. Just you're not gonna go from being overweight to 6-pack abs in a month. It's not going to happen. It doesn't need to happen. Probably would not be a healthy journey if you managed to do that. You'd probably be causing a lot of. That's how other people don't realize. When you do things too quick, you actually can cause damage to your organs.
For sure.
So it's a gradual thing. Every step in the right direction is a step in the right direction. Quinn, thank you so much for being here. This has been an absolute blast. I got a feeling I'm going to end up having you on the show again.
Oh, I'm always there.
Because your journey is still going.
Yeah.
And I know as you start helping people, as you start inspiring more people, you're going to have stories from third party to share. And I think that's going to be very inspiring to help a lot of people. So I'm definitely going to be asking you to come back on the show in some time and have this conversation again.
Awesome.
I guess we'll call it a wrap. We're kind of at around the hour mark right now, which I feel is a good, solid timeline for one of these episodes. So we'll just wrap it up. Everybody, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode. I have some other wonderful guests lined up to come on the show, and don't want you guys to miss it. And until then, I'm going to leave you guys the way I leave you every episode, and that is, if you see someone without a smile, give them one of yours. Cheers.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Warrior Way podcast. Don't forget to follow the show on your favorite platform. The Warrior Way podcast is streaming on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, and more. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to make sure you never miss a future episode. For even more content, value, and updates, follow me on social media at The Coach Cowan everywhere. If you have a remarkable story you'd like to share, come be my guest on the Warrior Way podcast. Visit coachcowan.ca/warrior guest. Grab your copy of my international best-selling book, Go Love Yourself, on Amazon. Available worldwide in digital and paperback formats. To learn more about my coaching programs or working with me, visit coachcowan.ca or contact me directly via email, contact@coachcowan.ca. Until next time, love yourself fiercely and let that love fuel your journey. Your path to success is uniquely yours. Cheers.